This is Friends Who Talk About Money from John Hancock, a show where we take on the money taboo and celebrate the power of financial conversations in all their honest, awkward, and inspirational glory. I'm your host, Claire Wasserman, writer, career coach, and financial advocate. It can get complicated when you combine family and finances. Whether it's getting kicked off the streaming service you pay for, pointing fingers about who is using up all the data on the phone plan, or rating mom and dad's supply of toilet paper, there's no hiding from flaws in a family's informal financial setup. On today's episode, we're inviting a family of four to talk about their financial entanglements, who's paying, who's mooching, and how setting expectations and clear lines of communication can help keep things fair and friendly. I'll also sit down with founder and CEO of Stash Wealth, Priya Malani, to break down how adult children can establish financial independence without severing financial ties. Time to talk money. All right, so I'd love to know, what are your name, ages, locations, occupations, please? So I'll start with you, Gary.
I'm Gary. I'm 62 years old. I live in Birmingham, Alabama, and I am a happy homemaker.
You're a house engineer.
And Bob.
I am also 62 and live in Birmingham, Alabama as well. I'm president of a company that manufactures vocational truck bodies.
I'm Leslie. I am 30 years old. I live in Needham, Massachusetts, and full disclosure, I work at John Hancock.
My name is Jack. I'm 27 years old, and I'm a recent law school graduate who will be starting working as an associate at a large law firm in Cleveland in October.
The way we grow up can have a huge impact on our relationship with money. So I want to begin with Bob and Gary about what your childhood was like and any money memories you have. So Gary, let's start with you. Did your parents ever talk about money when you were growing up?
No, that was absolutely a taboo conversation to have in my family. I made the mistake of asking my father one time what he made for a salary, and he just lost it. I mean, he was so upset with me, told me we could never ask that question. It was none of our business. He just got defensive about it. So I never talked about money ever again with my parents, except when Bob and I bought our first home. We bought a home in Hudson, Ohio, and we didn't have enough money to pay for the appliances. So I called my father and I said, do you think you could lend us $2,000 so we could buy a stove and a refrigerator? And my father's response to that was, if you can't afford to buy a home, you shouldn't buy a home. And Bob and I hung up the phone and looked at each other and said, you know, we really don't need the money when our parents are not with us anymore. We could kind of use some help right now. And come to find out 20 years later, Claire, that my father didn't have the money. And that is how he chose to tell me that.
On a scale of 1 to 10, now I'm going to fast forward through college, what would you say your financial literacy was at that point?
I thought we were a well-off family. I thought, we traveled a lot because my dad was in the service. We lived in different countries. We had lived on base housing. I thought we were really, really doing well until I always tell the kids, we went to McDonald's one day and my father said, you may have a hamburger, French fries, and a Coke, or you may have a hamburger and a milkshake. If you get a milkshake, you can't have the French fries. And I just looked at my mom and I said, wow. She said, yeah, we don't have that much money.
Must be why you love French fries now.
Now I love French fries.
Yeah. Okay, so Bob, did you have a similar childhood? Did you have a parent kind of say to you, nope, not talking about that, not talking about it ever? Or, what was growing up for you? What was money like?
Yeah, we never had that conversation. We were kind of independent. If you wanted something other than the groceries that were brought into the house, you had to buy it on your own money. So you had to go out and earn your own money. So I know I liked orange soda as a kid, but if I wanted orange soda, I would have to go, shovel a driveway, cut a lawn or something and buy my own. And then, of course, you would label it in the refrigerator because I was one of 6 kids. So you wouldn't want anyone else to take, what you spent your money on. But no, we never asked. In my case, my parents divorced when I was 14. So it was even, mine was even tighter at that point. But by then I'd been, doing odd jobs and working all along. But I never asked. It wasn't. I don't know if there was anything you ever asked in money was just never talked about.
Starting as a kid when you started to earn money young, how did you teach yourself, what is money? How do I use money? How do I grow money? Yeah, I'm curious where that kind of self-education started for you.
There was no internet. There was no, books laying around about how do you invest. Clearly, my parents never had any stocks, bonds, or investments of any sorts. So that was all later when you started to save a little more money, or save to buy a house, try and figure out what it is uh, need to set aside for retirement. Just things you pick up over time.
When you decided to get married, did you ever have conversations about money?
Oh yeah, I mean,
Did we? I don't remember any conversation.
The conversation was this, Claire, and it cracks me up. It's one of my kids' favorite stories. When Bob and I were dating, I lived in Massachusetts. I worked for two doctors, and Bob just graduated from college, and he was asked to take a job in Michigan. And we had known each other, like I said, since 1975. And this was 1980 when he graduated. And he asked me if I wanted to go live with him in Michigan. And I said, what? And he said, would you like to go live with me in Michigan? And I said, no, I have a really good job. Right now, I make more money than you. So if you want me to go with you to Michigan, you're going to have to ask me to marry you. The guy was floored.
Well, floored, but I moved to Michigan without you.
No, he did not move to Michigan without me. So we got married, and and we're still married, almost 40 years.
Okay. And so money obviously can feel taboo and people don't like to talk about it, even just a self-dialogue, but it's hard to talk about it with a significant other, but it's really important that you do that. Were you ever not on the same page around money? Did you have disagreements at all?
Oh yeah. Let's talk about Guido's. I would go to this little market called Guido's, and Bob loved fresh squeezed orange juice. And this is a small little segment of money, but it was so important for Bob at the time. I would buy these half gallons of orange juice, and I bring them home, and he would see this little tab on the front. It would say 11.15. And he said, my God, did you just spend $11.15 on that? And I said, no, Bob, that's the expiration date. And he goes, you got to stop buying Guido's orange juice. I mean,
yeah, you were put on a budget for Guido's.
Yeah, I was put on a budget after that for Guido's.
Yeah, that was our first. So, the computers came out at that point. I remember I had a luggable compact computer with maybe it was an agent screen. And so they had Quicken. So I bought Quicken and started to put all our checkbook in there and try to use that for a little planning. And then shortly after, I had our first quarterly review where I had the pie charts on what she spent for electrical bill or for food or for entertainment. And that we only had one of those reviews. And then Gary quit putting all the data into Quicken because she didn't enjoy the quarterly review.
I did not enjoy pie charts on my refrigerator when we both had jobs.
So when you decided to have kids, did you have a conversation about, how you were going to raise them, or, what the values around money that were important to you that you wanted to instill in them?
We waited a long time to have kids.
Yeah, we waited 7 years to have children. And I don't remember that money was an issue in talking about that. I knew because I had waited so long, we had waited so long to have children, I did not want to work. And so I told Bob I did not want to, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And I was able to do that.
You retired.
I retired.
I'm very envious. Did you both have conversations about how you were going to talk to your kids about money? I'm curious, just based on how you both grew up.
Bob has always wanted the kids to be able to not be, in debt and be able to live comfortably. So that's sort of, Bob took over that immediately. When I got pregnant, Bob started saving.
Yeah, my goal would have just been to save enough so at least for undergrad that I could pay for their undergrad education. And they wouldn't have to come out. Especially today, it's completely different. College, completely different cost versus what it was when I went to college. So you really don't want people to start with that kind of debt coming out of undergraduate school.
Yeah, and even so, in 2008 and then 2011, I mean, the market crashed and we ran out of money in the 529. So
we didn't run out. It evaporated.
It evaporated.
I saved it twice. I think they knew that whatever college they would get in, that we would pay for it. Yeah, I don't think we ever talked about money. Well, I taught, like in West Virginia, there was a junior achievement course or with junior achievement. So I was president of specialty chemicals business there, and we were tied to the junior achievement. So I would go into the high school and for different sessions teach high school students about personal finance. But it occurs to me I never sat down with Leslie and Jack and talked about that as well.
And in follow up to that, this is so interesting that Bob taught that and not our children, because when Leslie did go to college or got her first apartment, I remember her saying, "Mom, I don't really think I know how to write a check. Nobody taught me this kind of thing." It wasn't Venmo and all that at the time Leslie originally graduated. And so I was like, oh my God, we need to have you balance a checkbook, and we need to show you how to write a check, and, things you don't think about because it's just common knowledge for you.
I'm just curious for both of you, has your approach to money evolved over the years as the kids left the house?
Oh, I'm still a saver.
Yeah, he definitely is a saver. There's a joke that if he wasn't married to me, he'd be a millionaire.
Yeah, I'll spend money on memories or experiences. I have no problem doing. If you want to go out skiing, you want to go fishing, if you're building a memory, I have no issue at all spending, and because I think that's just an investment in, building the family stronger, building friends networks.
I think the kids do very well with what they make and what they do with their money. I don't know if it's because of us. I'm sure some of it is, but I think Leslie and Jack are very responsible. I'm very proud of them.
This is a great transition to Jack and Leslie. I was going to say welcome on, but you are already here and you have listened in. So curious, from what you've heard in the way that your parents just sort of describe themselves and their own values around money, did that sound familiar to you? Was there anything they said that, you didn't know that story or something surprised you at all? I'll start with you, Leslie.
Jack and I definitely would have benefited from taking my dad's finance class that he apparently taught outside of the home. We've never heard that story ever until today.
Nope.
So,
Nope.
This is a time when family talks about money, which is wonderful. But I think all the things he was saying in the class, we absolutely could have benefited from. Like, I didn't know how to write a check. Thanks for that call out. But he did teach us things inside of the house. Like, I always make the joke that he's constantly screaming, live off your balance sheet, not your income statement. My brother and I, our whole lives, little did we know what that meant until we actually had to do it. It was harder than it sounded in a magical fortune cookie moment. But, had we taken that class in West Virginia, maybe we would have understood. So I think that's the thing that surprised us the most. But they definitely did a lot of teaching, outside of the classroom to us.
Jack, when you think about your money values, how much of them have come from your parents or kind of just learning on your own?
I think the values that I have and the attitude that I have towards money largely comes from my parents. I think, just the idea that you should be saving, that you need to be responsible with your money, that even if it's a gift or kind of an impulse buy, you're thinking about how that affects a larger budget. That's always something that I'm thinking about. But I don't think I got from my parents, what I probably would have learned in that West Virginia financial literacy course.
What about you, Leslie? What was your financial literacy like when you, I guess, were in college and also when you graduated and you said, okay, I am an official adult now. Maybe I can't write a checkbook, but, did you have ideas of what money was or could be for yourself?
I think so. I had a job in college that sort of working like in the career development center, which was more fun for me than anything because I'm kind of a nerd. But it was something that got me to my extracurricular activities on the weekends. Like, I got to buy that extra shirt, or I got to treat my friends to the pitcher that was $2 because I had this job and didn't have to ask my parents for money. And there was some sort of, I don't know, appreciation of myself for being able to do that. That made me feel really good. So I had definitely an understanding of money. And then obviously graduation and going into the real world definitely hits you in the face a little bit harder than you're ever ready for when you live in New York City and are making $30,000 and think it's $200,000. It's not. I think the next day after I told him I had gotten my first job, I had an email from him that was an Excel document of my budget saying, all right, let's pretend this is how much your rent is in New York. This is how much you can spend on groceries a month. And doing nothing else a month because you don't make any money. So he was trying to give me a very real look at my finances, but I kind of said, I said, cool, I see this document, but I had to live it to really learn it.
And Bob, do you have a memory of that phone call when Leslie said, hey, I got this job, and you were like, and here's a list of things that you are no longer taking from us?
It was a little different than that. It was, hey, I got this job, which was fantastic. I was so proud of her to get it, start her career, albeit New York was a very difficult place for people to start a career. Claire, I do want to clear one thing up, though. I think I'm still paying for Leslie's cell phone bill.
Yeah, because we said we'd table the conversation to later, and then we never got around to it.
Let's define later. What does later mean?
I mean, it's a great question because now I have been married for almost 3 years. I own a home and pay for everything in my own life, but somehow I remain on the family cell phone plan. I'm not complaining, and hopefully this podcast does not lead to some other outcome.
What are other joint things going on here? Anything else that everybody's, pitching in on? Cable, all these different streaming platforms?
I'll give that to Leslie and Jack with their Amazon.
Jack and I shared an Amazon account for many years.
Mm-hmm.
We just broke up in probably February. It was time. It was not time for the family cell phone plan, but it was time for the Amazon account. We just knew too much about each other's lives. I accidentally bought something on his card. He accidentally bought something on my card. His girlfriend, now fiance, called me one time to have me snoop in his browsing history to see what she should get him for his birthday. I accidentally paid for his Audible subscription for an entire year. So it just got a little convoluted and no one really knew what anyone was paying for anymore. So we decided to take the adult leap and split into 2 Prime accounts, but it's tough.
I think we reached our breaking point. I think Leslie had a little bit of a crisis during the whole Audible situation. Unfortunately, part of the financial literacy, apparently Leslie checks her credit card statement once a year.
Annually,
So
yeah.
Annual review. So, she might be charged for something in April, but it's going to be January 1. She'll give you that call and be like, Jack, do you know that in March I paid for your Audible subscription? You'll be like, I don't, because it's almost 8 months later. So we thought, all right, let's just go our separate ways. And Leslie's right. We never really knew who was getting charged for what. You'd order a movie on Friday night and then you wouldn't even think about it, but it wouldn't go to your credit card and it would go to somebody else's, and we'd only find out much later.
I'm curious, when you look at the way Leslie manages money and sort of her approach to finances, is it similar or dissimilar to the way you look at money?
I think they're very similar. I think Leslie has nice taste. She enjoys nice things. But at the same time, she's looking at money from a long-term view. And I'd say that I have a similar view of money and what it could do for me and how I treat my own money. But we're at very different, not totally different, but we're at different life stages right now. So I haven't started working. I'm a recent law school graduate. So I'm kind of dealing with intermittent cash flows but still trying to set up, what the next year of my life is going to look like. Where I think, Leslie is established and has a job. And so she has a broader view of what her financial future is going to be.
Would you agree with all that, Leslie?
I do. I think even, I've been working now for almost 10 years, so I didn't, go to grad school or get a second degree, but that was something I wasn't honestly super interested in doing. I look back and, I'm living in New York. I'm asking my parents for like $20 every couple of weeks because I want to go do something like see a show or something I can't actually afford. Meanwhile, I'm paying for all of my insurance, putting money into a 401k, and still putting 10% of my income into a savings account because those were things that I was told I was supposed to do. So my mom always did the books for our house, I guess you could say. Even though she was the happiness maker / homemaker, she was in charge of all of the money. So I kind of saw myself, and even in my family life, see myself as that role because I'm always just making sure that we're set up for the future no matter what.
In an earlier conversation we had, you mentioned that you actually don't see yourself living as comfortably as your parents. I'm curious, Leslie, why did you say that?
We're so proud of our parents and what they've built that it's almost hard to see yourself being that same level of success or more successful than them because they're like these weird people that you put on a pedestal. But I think that we'll figure it out and we'll be all great and happy, and financial happiness will mean something different to every single generation. It's just different scales every generation.
Weird people on a
That was
pedestal.
beautiful.
I love that.
It's true. That's parents. Weird people on a pedestal.
Jack, would you agree that you're concerned maybe you don't see yourself living as comfortably as your parents?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say not as comfortably, because to me that goes probably towards what Leslie was saying in terms of defining, success and financial success and happiness and generationally and also just for yourself. And so I think certainly probably like Leslie, I don't see myself maybe being in the same financial position as my parents, but I think that I will live as comfortably because I've learned how to prioritize what is really important to me. But I think Leslie and I have really understood that we're always going to have to define comfort and success and financial success kind of on our own terms, because we didn't think, maybe not that it wasn't possible, but we didn't think it was entirely likely that we would achieve the same sort of financial success as our parents.
It all goes back to going to that secret financial advisor meeting that they hijacked me with. Like, he taught me a lot, and I will now know what financial success looks like because I was bombarded with that meeting.
I think we skipped that story. This sounds like an excellent story. So you said you were ambushed, or what happened here?
I was living in New York City and came home to Cleveland at the time. And my parents said that they were taking me to their financial advisor because I was, in charge of their will, and they wanted to make sure I had his contact information and knew who he was, and I had access to him. So they wanted, him to run down the will for me. And I was like, of course, I'm happy to do that. But we get to the meeting and there's no will and there's a guy, but he's instead basically laying out my financial future and showing me that I have no money and that I need to figure out how to move or how to make more money or how to get something different, because the path I'm on is not the one to financial success. So I was half listening and mostly angry the whole meeting because I had been duped, and I didn't get any information about the will, but I did learn that I needed to figure something out financially for myself. So I shortly after ended up moving to Boston and changing my life entirely and getting a different job. And, it was just one of those weird awakening moments that you don't want to have and that your parents force upon you because it's the right thing to do.
I never got a financial sit down from a financial advisor or from my dad, and I'm not sure if it was intentional or if it's one of those, you're so focused on that first child, we're going to do this, and then by the time the second child rolls around, you're like, we did that with Jack, right? And then nope, nobody really checks.
Didn't work with Leslie. It wasn't going to work with him.
That's probably the closest to
That's
this.
True.
Yeah.
You all are so lovely. Thank you. Thanks for doing this. I'm also open to being adopted, so I appreciate.
You're welcome to the family, Claire.
Okay, we're going to end with a very quick lightning round. So answer whatever comes to top of mind, whatever your instinct is, go with it. First question, who has the most expensive taste?
Jack.
What's everyone most likely to splurge on?
Our dogs.
Dogs, yeah.
Correct.
Who has got the most cash in their wallet right now?
Bob.
Gary.
She is in charge of all of the money.
If I have $3 in my wallet, I'll be surprised.
I'm here with Priya Malani, who is a millennial money expert and the founder and CEO of Stash Wealth, a virtual financial service for Henrys, who are high earners, not rich yet. Hey, Priya, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Claire.
Bob and Gary clearly had differing views about money. I mean, Bob put Gary on a budget. When a couple is not on the same page when it comes to money, what advice would you give?
This is a great question. And Claire, I think you've heard me say this before. There was a money.com study done a couple years ago that found out that 70% of couples fight about money more than sex. So getting on the same page is certainly important. And ultimately, we talk about how money really relates to values. Now, how to do that, the best advice that we find works is to have couples start a conversation around their goals.
Fast forward 10 years to when Bob and Gary were raising 2 kids. Any tips for instilling money values in children?
I know Bob and Gary both spoke about the fact that their parents weren't super open about money, but open communication with your children can actually greatly impact the way that they think about their money. So just simply being honest with them, maybe about mistakes you've made, and finding opportunities to have those conversations. Maybe you got a credit card and got into credit card debt coming out of college and you're like, whoops, shouldn't have done that. And you don't have to talk to them just about the negatives, like, oh, I got into credit card debt. You can talk to them about like positive things that happened too, to instill in them certain values that you want them to have. Like maybe the reason you were able to pay for them to go to college was because you opened up a 529 account and you saved in it, or you opened up a savings account to buy their first bike. All of those conversations are a really great way to instill money values in children.
So Leslie and Jack, both mentioned that their financial attitudes largely came from their parents, right? But they also said that a lot of their financial literacy was self-taught. So what roles do financial goals play in being financially savvy?
Goals are absolutely instrumental. In our opinion, everything should be very, very intentional. Just telling yourself you need to be responsible with your money is not going to make you more responsible with your money, right? The best way is to have goals that you really care about, whether it's things or experiences. And once you have these things in mind that you want to spend your money on, you're automatically going to start building the behaviors needed to be on track for those goals.
You heard the shared phone plan and Amazon account conversation. What are some ways adult children can reach financial independence while still maintaining a connection to their parents?
Yeah, so quite frankly, it's really no big deal if you're still on your parents' family plan. We see that all the time. It's like actually pretty common. It's really not the end of the world. As long as it's not putting your parents in a bad spot and they're not nagging you to get off their plan. I think ultimately it goes from when the dependency goes from harmless to harmful. And that's like when you're relying on your parents in a situation that ultimately is putting their financial security in jeopardy. And that's also where it's on the parents to come back with that level of transparency and open communication. We've also seen situations where parents were letting their kids mooch off of them and they are jeopardizing their ability to be able to retire. Helping provide your kids with tools to be financially independent so that they don't mooch off of you forever is, I guess, part of parenting. In a way.
Glad you said that because I am still in my family plan. But listen, it's cheaper for everybody. So I'm helping them out just as much as they're helping me.
Don't let them forget it.
I'm so grateful that you came on the show to be with us, Priya. I always love talking to you. I always learned so much. And I know everybody listening learned a lot from you too, or at least I hope so. So, thanks again for doing this.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Claire.
Thanks for joining us. A huge thank you to our guests, Bob, Gary, Leslie, and Jack, for an open and honest conversation about their family finances, and to our expert guest, Priya, for offering advice to adult children navigating financial independence. Don't forget to subscribe to Friends Who Talk About Money wherever you listen to your podcasts. Talk again soon.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers at the time of recording and are subject to change as market and other conditions warrant. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be, nor shall it be interpreted or construed as, a recommendation or providing advice, impartial or otherwise, regarding any specific product or security.